Coordinating Agency, NOACA's webinar on our proposed regional transit plan. I'm Grace Gallucci, Executive Director, and we appreciate the time that you're taking to be involved in our transit planning initiatives for the Northeast Ohio region. As the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for Northeast Ohio, which serves the counties of Cuyahoga, Geauga, Lake, Lorain, and Medina, NOACA is excited to engage you in our goals, programs, and upcoming projects. And specifically today, we're talking about Northeast Ohio's Regional Transit Plan, a plan for improving public transportation in the region over the next 25 years. The plan presents goals, objectives, and initiatives to enhance transit service and reduce impacts to the environment. As you know, public transportation supports residents and businesses in Northeast Ohio by connecting people to jobs, education, services, and their community. Providing these connections contributes to our economy and helps our environment. The plan also addresses how our resources can be better used to achieve their greatest potential by ensuring our existing transit routes, vehicles, and stations are reliable, accessible, and in good condition. The plan focuses on using the existing routes as the building blocks for expanding transit connections and also increasing transit access for all residents, particularly those in historically underserved communities. Overall, providing transit that connects residents to economic opportunities ensures the region's strength and vitality. To this, we're excited about the direction that we're headed in connecting with this new plan, and we welcome feedback and input from all individuals, organizations, and communities. Please continue to be a part of our webinars and public engagement initiatives as we strategically build on the regional transit plan. We have our great team here from AECOM that will now give us some highlights of the plan and discuss how we will sustain and grow our public transit system. Again, thank you for joining us, and I hope you will continue to work with us to help build this future plan that we are going to discuss today. AECOM folks, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Executive Director Gallucci. And welcome to everyone who is watching this and participating in this webinar. My name is Peter Lawson Jones, and I am serving as the Public Engagement Sub-Consultant with AECOM on this project. And I'm joined today by my good friend.
Thank you. I'm Ken Sislak. I'm a Vice President with AECOM. And if you're wondering why Peter and I are so close in contact with each other and not wearing masks, believe it or not, we're members of the same family. My grandson is
my nephew. And so it's always a pleasure to work with Ken, who's really a nationally acknowledged as an expert in public transportation here throughout our country. We want to thank you for watching, participating in this webinar, and we certainly want to thank NOACA for selecting us to conduct this very, very critical study. You know that public transit agencies have always been beset with great demands and have been underfunded. And this is particularly acute problem during our pandemic, because we found that our public transit agencies, their revenue sources have been compromised. The income and the revenue that's generated by fares is down. The revenue that's generated through sales tax is depressed. And over the last 20 years or so, with rare exception of perhaps 1 year, the state per capita funding for public transit in Ohio has continued to diminish and to go down every year. But despite that, the demands on public transit authorities have remained the same, if indeed they've increased. And we found that particularly to be true as regards furnishing public transit for inter-county, inter-regional public transportation. So we feel that this it's a particularly propitious and opportune time for this study. So we have undertaken this study in really two phases. Our first task was to take a look at existing conditions in the 5 counties that comprise NOACA's jurisdiction. And then in doing that, we've undertaken essentially 2 missions. The first was to conduct an analysis of each of the counties to determine where the population centers are, where the business centers are, and where is the cluster of economic opportunity and activity. And then we've also took a look at the public transit agencies in the 5 counties and examined their structure, their source of revenue, how they operate. And as part of that, we gave special attention to the demand for inter-county, cross-county public transportation services. And in doing this, we found, you can also see that on this particular slide, that we took a look at 4 other regions throughout the country to see how they are dealing with regional public transit demand. We looked at Chicago, metropolitan Seattle, Minneapolis, and San Diego. And we found a number of, in terms of regional travel patterns, we took a look at those and we came up with some interesting observations and findings.
We also discovered that there's a lot of collaboration going on. One of the things that we started with when we started the study is we looked at perhaps maybe the way to manage the strategies going forward for regional transit is to look at unifying all the transit systems. There's 5 transit systems in this NOACA region, the largest of which is the Cleveland RTA. There's Lake Tran, there's Medina County, Lorain County, and Geauga County Transit. Each one of those agencies are providing wonderful services to their local communities. But as Peter pointed out, our discovery is that there's a lot of people crossing those borders. Those borders, the county lines don't matter to people going to work from Cuyahoga County to Mentor, and people who live in Paynesville going to downtown Cleveland for work, and as it is elsewhere around the region. So we looked at maybe a unified transit system was the way to go, but we discovered that there was a lot of coordination going on among the transit systems today. For example, there's coordinated timetables between RTA, Lake Tran on the Lakeshore services, and they coordinate timetables and transfers as well. Fares, for example, are collected on the Lake Tran bus, and you have a free transfer to the RTA bus. And the same is true with Metro Transit in Akron. You can get on a Metro Transit bus and transfer to an RTA bus by showing your fare payment for the Metro bus in Akron. So there's a lot of other coordination going on with Geauga County, for example. RTA coordinates with Geauga County for trips to the Amish communities to go to the Cleveland Clinic, for example. I know that there's been some Lorain County and RTA had service schedule coordination in the past, and there's discussions about doing that again, particularly in the eastern part of Lorain County that borders Cuyahoga County, Avon Lake, and perhaps Lorain and Elyria as well. There's other coordination going on in terms of administrative tasks, such as Lake Tran is trying to help coordinate the demand response scheduling by providing the software to Geauga County. And NeoRide, which is a voluntary joint powers authority kind of organization among various transit agencies in Northeast Ohio, are working together to coordinate procurement efforts for things like fuels and maybe IT services and software. And NeoRide recently received a grant from the federal government that funds mobile ticket readers that really will help coordinate fare collection throughout the region.
And one of the things that was discovered during our study as we tried to get a sense of the extent that the public relies on public transit here in Northeast Ohio in NOACA's footprint was that public transportation has a 3%, 3.1 to be exact, mode share in the region. And that,
but I'd like to point out, Peter, that while it seems like a low number, that 3.1 mode share is of a very large number. And if you would look at only the mode share for work trips, it's a much higher percentage. A lot of more people use public transit for their work trips or go to school trips. Not very many people ride the bus to go to the hardware store like I do when I'm running out of paints and nuts and bolts for home repairs. So that number is 3.1% of a very much larger number. And so the total number of trips being made by transit on a daily basis is
still quite substantial.
Still quite substantial, about 250,000 a day.
And that we find that a lot of the cross-country, or rather cross-county travel starts in various counties that are part of NOACA and ends in downtown Cleveland or in University Circle, which now rivals downtown Cleveland as a business center and as a center for economic activity.
In fact, interestingly enough, the University Circle as a central business district is the second largest outside of downtown Cleveland.
In the entire state.
In the entire state, it's bigger than Columbus and downtown Cincinnati, for example.
And along those lines, the vast majority of inter-county or regional work trips, no matter what the mode, by car, by public transportation, et cetera, have Cuyahoga County as a destination, and generally, once again, downtown Cleveland or University Circle. Part of our phase 1 study was to have in-depth and lengthy conversations with a number of the stakeholders in the region. We interviewed county commissioners and municipal officials and key staff with public transit agencies and several private stakeholders. And as a matter of fact, there have been 2 rounds of such discussion. One at the initial phase when this study was just getting underway. And then over the last month and a half, we've gone back, revisited our meetings with the various stakeholders.
And it's been very interesting, some of the findings. As I suggested earlier on, there's 2 ways to unify transit services, and that is to unify the system itself by joining everybody together with a central governance agency or a single agency, or through coordination, which is the way the Cleveland RTA first started when they had multiple suburban transit systems before they were all merged into the Regional Transit Authority over a period of almost 40 years. We found in talking to the transit agencies and the elected public officials in the outlying counties, as well as Cuyahoga County, there was really little or no support for a unified system. But there was a great deal of interest and dialogue about coordinating services and coordinating of administrative tasks.
As a matter of fact, it could easily be said that necessity is the mother of collaboration in this regard, as public transit agencies look for ways to continue to deliver the traditional services and new services, but without a lot more in the way of revenue, and oftentimes with even less.
So this collaboration really needs to address the declining transit ridership over time that we've witnessed since the 80s, the shifting which is caused primarily by the shifting population trends, sprawl without growth, employment. It's shifted away from the CBD. A lot of the downtown business office buildings have been converted to apartments now or condos, and the employment has shifted from the CBD to regional job hubs,
like Solon, like Independence, and others.
Exactly. And of course, as Peter said earlier, the growth in travel demand to University Circle, the second largest CBD in Ohio, was rather startling to us. So the strategies that we decided that we're going to concentrate on, the action strategies, is really divided into 4 areas. One is the inter-county, which Peter talked about earlier. which is going from one county to the other within the NOACA region. Regional, crossing the county lines, connections to areas outside the NOACA region, which includes the Akron and Canton and perhaps outside of those areas. And certainly there's near-term and aspirational strategies that I think NOACA has been addressing with its Hyperloop studies, for example, is connecting us way outside the region and keeping us connected to the world outside of Ohio.
Connecting us to that mega region that is the Midwest. So when we look at some of the short-term actions, and we're talking about actions that can be undertaken easily within the next 1 to 5 years, amongst them are unifying the regional transit information system, coming up with a website, a helpline like 411 or like 211 or 611, in which riders can get the information they need so that they can easily negotiate their way and navigate their way from one spot in one county to another in an adjoining or adjacent county. And we want to encourage, as Ken referenced NeoRide, encourage the use of something that NeoRide has developed, their Masabi Transit app, which could be right on a public transit user's phone and would enable us to unify a system and familiar with riders across the 5 counties that are within NOACA's footprint. And related to this is unifying the graphics, combining route maps that would, again, enhance and facilitate and ease the experience, the transit experience of riders coming from one point in one county to another in a adjacent county.
And I think the ease of use is really what is the thing that we are most stressing in this effort to unify transit in the region through collaboration and coordination. And one of those ways to do that is to coordinate regional fare policies and systems, because right now each transit agency has its own fare system, its own fare collection mechanisms. And if we can coordinate the fare structures and unify the policies that govern those fare structures, and then develop, as you suggested, with maybe the NeoRide, adopting the NeoRide Masabi system as a universal transit payment application, then we would have a unified fare collection system. Again, the stress here is not to unify the systems under one governance, but to unify the systems in operation and policy so that the person, the passenger, the customer, the taxpayer is got a sense that it is one unified system without having to worry about how much the fare is going to be, or is he eligible for the reduced fare here or there. So it's a matter of making sure that we have unified applications and protocols in place to give the appearance that we have a unified system, even though we have separate transit systems governed by their own counties.
Now, as Ken mentioned, there are also some long-term, some aspirational strategies that we suggested and proposed. The one is intercounty transit service on a demand response basis, not on a fixed route basis, because we find that the former makes a lot more sense, is a lot more logical, a lot more easily implemented and cost effective if we try to do this on a demand response as opposed to fixed route system. And one of the destinations, primary destinations for such demand response system would of course be University Circle for both business and leisure activities.
And micromobility, shared use mobility, such things as Uber and Lyft and those kinds of things, even post-pandemic, we will probably still have those services available to people. And we cannot discount active modes, because active modes, walking and bicycling, those are wonderful means by which to get to a fixed route transit service, to a bus line or a rapid transit line. Most everybody is a pedestrian to and from the transit service, and so we have to make sure that our pedestrian ways are clearly marked and safe and secure, and that the places to wait for buses are safe and secure as well.
And of course, as was mentioned earlier by Ken, when all is said and done, the one thing we want to improve is the customer experience, to make it as easy as possible, as efficient as possible. And this again involves aligning and unifying fair policy, to have a system, a common system of apps and websites and numbers, telephone numbers that can be used, cell phone numbers that can be used to get the information that a rider requires, to make it as easy as possible for them to navigate from one point to the next.
And even in the short term, while we're suggesting that the transit agencies work toward collaboration with respect to support functions and such things as procurement and sharing administrative functions, perhaps maybe planning and scheduling and those kinds of things.
Dispatching.
It is also a long-term action. This is a process of continuing improvement and looking at continuing ways to improve the way we deliver our services at lower costs to the overall customer in order to provide the kinds of levels of service we need to provide, rather than burdening ourselves with administrative costs when those necessary dollars can be used in providing the service directly on the streets themselves.
And we fully believe that the more exploration there is, the more collaboration there is on some of these administrative and backroom functions, that there's going to be increased opportunity and increased awareness of other ways in which this kind of cooperation and partnership can occur to, again, reduce the cost of delivering services so those dollars can be used to improve the experience of the rider.
So let's look at some of the ways that transit systems can actually coordinate their services in a way to provide that kind of inter-county regional connection that people are demanding, because they don't stop traveling when they reach a county line. We're suggesting that the NOACA 2040 Aim Forward visionary plan be absolutely implemented, and pieces and parts of it should go under study as soon as they transit agencies can, and we move forward with that. We see that there is a need for bi-directional regional services. For example, today, Lake Tran is providing services from Lake County to downtown Cleveland. But we know, for example, that there are people living in Cuyahoga County, particularly eastern Cuyahoga County, that have jobs in Mentor and just across the border in Lake County. There's no reason why we have to just run the service to the county line and force people to transfer at the county line at the Shoregate Shopping Center, for instance. There's an opportunity there for the two transit agencies to coordinate and collaborate in a way that they can run-through services. They share the costs. They both provide the equipment and drivers, and develop a branded service, if you will, along the Lakeshore Boulevard corridor in order to provide bi-directional services all day long, so that it's just not one direction in the morning and the outbound direction in the evening to Lake County, but we have bi-directional service. And the same thing can happen in Summit County, for example. We have buses coming from Stark County, the Canton Area Transit Agency, Metro Akron Regional Transit Agency. They're going north to Cleveland, to downtown and the Stokes VA Hospital. And there's no reason why RTA in cooperation and collaboration with those agencies can't provide the southbound service in the morning hours, because there are people living in Cuyahoga County that are working in northern Summit County or in downtown Akron. So there are opportunities here to provide that service, and we need to coordinate those with those services and the MPOs in those regions.
With the transcendent goal being to better connect through transportation systems of public, in particular, the 3.5 million residents in greater Northeast Ohio.
And there's services that go beyond this Northeast Ohio. I mean, we still do a lot of travel between Pittsburgh and Detroit and Chicago. And I know that NOACA has been studying with their Hyperloop ways in which we can improve the travel between those cities. So we're less reliant on air travel and we'd be more reliant on ground travel at very high speeds. And this would give you an indication of how we connect to those areas within the state, outside the state. There's a lot of people. This is, the Great Lakes megapolis, if you will. It's a very large part of the United States. It encompasses, almost 10 million or more people in that region. And when you connect into Chicago, you are now connected to the gateway to the world through the international airport at O'Hare. So we need to maintain these connections as well. And it's just not highways. It might be railways or Hyperloop, as NOACA is studying today. So those are the kinds of things. So funding for these kinds of expanded services is really a challenge, because each one of these agencies is strapped for funding today. And as Peter said in his opening remarks about how the pandemic has cut ridership, which means fare box revenue is down, sales tax revenue is down. It's been a real struggle. And then when you couple that with the cuts in funding from the state level, it becomes a problem. So Peter, you're a former state representative and a county commissioner from Cuyahoga County. What do you think about how we go about funding these expanded services?
Well, Ken, just as there is the absolute need for public transit agencies throughout the region, throughout NOACA's ambit, to collaborate and partner as regards the delivery of services, particularly those that are cross-county in nature. There's a similar need for the public authorities, the cities and the counties in Northeast Ohio to also collaborate, in effect, to coalesce for purposes of lobbying and advocacy. We in Northeast Ohio are third of the state, and it shouldn't matter who's in power in the state legislature, in the governor's mansion, in Washington, D.C. If we advocate in a regional way, we will always be in position to have an impact and to secure the revenue and the resources that we need in Northeast Ohio to meet our common needs. But this can't happen if the lobbyists are just representing one city or a single county. It has to be regional in how it's shaped and how it operates. That's the only way that we can make sure to get the resources that we need to fund all of our functions, governmental functions here in Northeast Ohio, and especially those that are regional in aspect, like finding funds to support inter-county transit here in Northeast Ohio.
So what are the next steps in our study? We've already accomplished, we already accomplished several of these. We've provided presentations to the NOACA staff and board. We've vetted the plan with the regional transit agencies.
Again, with 2 rounds of interviews and discussions in which we've done our own kind of listening campaign to find out exactly how they felt about providing some of the services that we're suggesting and how they felt about some of the things that we found through our study.
And we're coordinating with the NOACA Long Range Transportation Plan and participating in this public outreach effort in concert with the Long Range Transportation Planning. So what we're trying to do is explain the action plans, highlight the regional travel and the wider economic benefits, and I hope we've done a good job. We will be preparing a suggested strategic plan for the NOACA board's approval in December, and we will be having a live Q&A session on Tuesday, October 27th at 2:30 p.m. Local Cleveland time. So if you're available for questions and answers, we will be available live and sort of in person, virtually, for those questions on October 27th at 2:30 p.m. That concludes our prepared remarks.
And you can rest assured that the input of those with whom we've interviewed, the elected officials, the public transit authorities, as well as you and your own questions that we look forward to receiving next week, that all of those will be taken in consideration as we draft the final report that will be submitted to NOACA at its December meeting for approval.
Thank you again and stay safe.